Mary Neely. Most ex-members seem to have left because Miscavige made the organization unbearable. However, I think, as an outsider, the blame still belongs to Hubbard. He was Victor Frankenstein, and Miscavige was his creation. Do you think if Hubbard were here today, would he have a tirade and ask Miscavige what he did to his enterprise? Or would he pat him on the back and say, "Well done, grasshopper. I trained you well"? If Hubbard has lived longer and there were no Miscavige in charge, would you have stayed? Would you still be in? Okay, great question. So first off, recently I did talk about Hubbard and Miscavige and what Hubbard would think about what was going on in the organization now. And basically the answer was, I don't think he'd be very pleased. In fact, I think he'd be, if he was still cognizant of what was going on with his little brainchild, I don't think he'd be very happy with the direction that Miscavige has taken it. He has shrunk the organization by orders of magnitude. He has made Scientology's name absolutely toxic in any public conversation about it, unless, of course, you're talking to a Scientologist. And he has grown the reserves, and he's moved the projects forward to, slam Hubbard's name into history by keeping all of those, vault projects going. So I guess Hubbard might be happy about those things, but generally speaking, I think he would, figuratively decapitate Miscavige if Hubbard appeared back on the scene. Obviously theoretical, since Hubbard's long dead and isn't coming back. Now, as far as what I was interested in with your question here, though, is you asked about whether I would have stayed or whether I'd still be in, and that really got my wheels turning, because I was like, wow, I'm not sure. A lot of my answer to that question would depend on whether, if Hubbard hadn't died, if Miscavige hadn't taken over, if there were no Miscavige in charge, you said, would I have stayed? So let's posit a scenario that Miscavige didn't come along. So the people who were in charge of Scientology when Hubbard took off and went off into hiding, let's say they remained in charge and they never got RPF'd or sent off or kicked out, and they continued doing the function of management that we talk about. Would the structure that's created now, as I've described in my Scientology Organizational Madness video, would that structure even exist? Probably. Let's go ahead and go with it, because the people who came up with that whole structure did so while Hubbard was still alive. So let's assume that the structure that I described in that video exists and actually operates the way I said it would. In that situation, would I still be in Scientology? No, I don't think I would, because as I laid out in that Organizational Madness video, which I'll link to below in the description of this video, I would still have been in a absolute chaotic madhouse of an organization because of all the bypass that would be going on all the time. Hubbard was not necessarily the organizational genius that Scientology likes to make him out to be. And the system that was come up with and the way that system was run, regardless of Miscavige, was a system of people giving random orders and directions to other people who had no business doing so. That kind of system it begs to be corrupted. It practically, begs for it, right? It would be so easy for another kind of Miscavige to have come along that even if David Miscavige himself hadn't been the one, somebody else very, very easily could have risen in the ranks, a Marty Rathbun, for example. I think we're pretty clear at this point that Marty Rathbun is not a good guy and never was. Now, that's all relative, of course, to our views about Scientology. Maybe in real life and in the normal course of events, Marty Rathbun is a wonderful guy, a loving husband, dutiful husband, loving father, whatever, however you want to describe him. Maybe as a person, he's a great guy. But, what he's done in regards to Scientology, not so great. And that's the basis of my judgment of the man. So Had he risen in the ranks, who knows what would have happened? Or again, somebody else like him. The fact that the Office of Special Affairs exists, that fair gaming policy exists, that the practice of disconnection is still and was and is still in use under Hubbard, under Miscavige. Miscavige has made it maybe worse than it was under Hubbard, but the policy was still originated by L. Ron Hubbard. I fully agree with you that L. Ron Hubbard was Dr. Frankenstein and Miscavige is his monster. So I don't think I would still be in, because I think that the nature of a destructive cult and the nature of how it's run would have eventually forced me out. And I think that what Mark Headley has always said, that the end result or the EP of Scientology is that you leave Scientology. And according to the numbers that I have, which are very, very broad estimates, but for every person who's ever been interested in or gotten involved in Scientology, like 10 other people have been there, done that, and took off, right? I mean, it's a massive attrition rate out of that organization. So I think I would have eventually left, and that's kind of my reasoning on it, and I hope that makes sense.